Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We'll continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, Text 63. Kirtiordva Gitaya Pumbis.
Kirtaya urdhva gitaya pumbhi.
Trailokye tatra tatraha.
Trailoke tatra tatraha.
Pravishta karna randreshu.
Pravishta karna randreshu.
Strinam Rama Satam Iva.
Trinam Rama Satam Iva.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Throughout the whole universe, in the higher, lower, and middle planetary systems, Pṛthu Mahārāja's reputation was loudly declared, and all ladies and saintly persons heard his glories, which were as sweet as the glories of Lord Ramachandra. In this verse, the words Trinam and Rama are significant. It is the practice among ladies to hear and enjoy the praises of certain heroes. From this verse, it appears that Pṛthu Mahārāja's reputation was so great that ladies all over the universe would hear of it with great pleasure. At the same time, his glories were heard all over the universe by the devotees, and they were as pleasing as Lord Ramachandra's glories. Lord Ramachandra's kingdom is still existing, and recently there was a political party in India named the Ram Rajya Party, which wanted to establish a kingdom resembling the kingdom of Ram. Unfortunately, modern politicians want the kingdom of Ram without Ram himself. Although they have banished the idea of God consciousness, they still expect to establish the kingdom of Ram. Such a proposal is rejected by devotees. Pṛthu Mahārāja's reputation was heard by saintly persons because he exactly represented Lord Ramachandra, the ideal king. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 22nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Pṛthu Mahārāja's meeting with the 4 Kumaras. So Pṛthu Mahārāja was so glorious that people would take pleasure in hearing about him, speaking about his glories. And as people are always glorifying Lord Ramachandra. So chapter 23, Mahārāja Pṛthu is going back home. Maitriya Vachan.
Maitriya Uvacha.
Drishtvat Manam Pravayasam.
Drishtamanam pravashayam.
Ekada Vainya Atmavan.
Ekada
Ekadavenya
Atmavan.
Atmavan. Atmavan.
Atmana Vardhita Shesha.
Atmana Vardita
Atmanavardita Shesha.
Swanu Sarga Prajapati.
Anugarg Sarga Prajapati.
Jagatas Tastushas Chapi.
Jagatastachushcha api.
Rittido Dharma Britsata.
Pratido dhamma vrittata.
Nishpaditeshwaradesho.
Nishpadishvaro adesho.
Yat Artham Iha Jajnivan.
Yatartham iha jagjivan.
Atmajesha Atmajamnyasya.
Atmajeshu atmajanasya.
Virahad Rudatim Iva.
Virhat rudratim iva.
Prajasu Vimana Hasev Eka.
Prajasu vimansu eka.
Sadarogat tapovanam.
Sadarogatam.
Vanam.
At the last stage of his life, when Maharaj Pṛthu saw himself getting old, that great soul, who was king of the world, divided whatever opulence he had accumulated amongst all kinds of living entities, moving and non-moving. He arranged pensions for everyone according to religious principles, and after executing the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in complete coordination with him, he dedicated his sons unto the earth, which was considered to be his daughter. Then Maharaj Pṛthu left the presence of his citizens, who were almost lamenting and crying from feeling separation from the king, and went to the forest alone with his wife to perform austerities. Maharaj Pṛthu was one of the Shaktiavesh incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, he appeared on the surface of the earth to execute the orders of the Supreme. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all planets, and he is always anxious to see that in each and every planet, the living entities are happily living and executing their duties. So, what does Bhagavad Gita tell us? Who is the owner of all the planets? Who is the creator of the planets? Who's the proprietor of the planets? Who's the controller of the planets?
Krishna.
Krishna.
Yes, thank you. So we may be mistaken that we are, but Bhagavad Gita tells us that Krishna is. So as soon as there is some discrepancy in the execution of duties, the Lord appears on the earth as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata. Since there were so many discrepancies during the reign of King Vena, the Lord sent his most confidential devotee, Maharaj Pṛthu, to settle things. So Krishna says, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya, whenever there is decline in religious practices, Krishna comes himself or he sends his empowered expansions, incarnations, or his confidential servants. So in this case, he sent Pṛthu. What was the situation before Pṛthu Maharaj appeared? Who was the king? And what was
Vena.
the
King
Vena.
Vena.
Yeah. And was the situation peaceful and nice and happy when
No.
Vena was there? No, yeah.
No.
Yeah, so that's the reason Pṛthu Maharaj came. So therefore, after executing the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and settling the affairs of the world, Maharaj Pṛthu was ready to retire. He had been exemplary in his governmental administration, and now he was to become exemplary in his retirement. He divided all his property amongst his sons and appointed them to rule the world, and then he went to the forest with his wife. It is significant in this connection that it is said that Maharaj Pṛthu retired alone and at the same time took his wife with him. According to Vedic principles, when retiring from family life, one can take his wife with him, for the husband and wife are considered to be one unit. So, thus, they can both combinedly perform austerities for liberation. So, Vanaprastha. Vanaprastha means going to the forest. He's retiring. He's not staying to be the king till he dies. This being an example that he did his duties very nicely when he was living. Now it's time for him to retire. He's showing that at the end of life, one needs to dedicate to spiritual activities. After he is, his responsibility he's passed on to his sons. He's not being irresponsible about it. He's saying that his sons are able to take care of the kingdom, so he's passing his responsibility. This is the path of that Mahārāja Pṛthu, who was an exemplary character, followed, and this is also the way of Vedic civilization. One should not simply remain at home till the time of death, but should separate from family life at a timely moment and prepare himself to go back to Godhead. So in this Kali Yuga, it may not be practical for us to go to the forest. We are city people, not used to living in the forest. Might come back running the very same night. So we can remain at home wherever we are, but take up more of hearing and chanting, dedicate more time to hearing from the scriptures and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. As a Shakti-Avish incarnation of God, who had actually come from Vaikuntha as a representative of Krishna, Mahārāja Pṛthu was certain to go back to Godhead. Nonetheless, in order to set the example in all ways, he also underwent severe austerities in the Tapovan. It appears that in those days there were many Tapovans or forests, especially meant for retirement and the practice of austerities. Indeed, it was compulsory for everyone to go to the Tapovan to fully accept the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For it is very difficult to retire from family life and at the same time remain at home. So Pṛthu Maharaj, he didn't need to do these austerities, but he's setting an example that towards the end of life, one should dedicate the time to spiritual life. So we are advised to begin hearing and chanting right away, because by the end of our life, we may not be inclined to hear and chant. And so Lord Chaitanya, he says, just take up this chanting process wherever you are, whoever you are, doesn't matter. Just begin chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Tatrapi adabhyanyamo
Tatra api adapayanyamo
Vaikhanasa susamate
Vaikhanasa susammate
arabdha ugra tapase
Arabdha ugra tapasi
yathasva vijaye pura.
Yatha swavijaye pura.
After retiring from family life, Mahārāja Pṛthu strictly followed the regulations of retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. So he's really being very exemplary in all his actions. As it is necessary for one to become very active in family life, similarly, after retirement from family life, it is necessary to control the mind and senses. This is possible when one engages himself fully in the devotional service of the Lord. So control of mind and senses is automatically achieved when we engage the mind and the senses in the service of Krishna. Service to Krishna begins with the tongue by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and by tasting Krishna prasad. Fixing the mind on Krishna. What is the words Krishna saying in Bhagavad Gita about the mind and fixing it on him?
Manmana bhav madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru.
Yes,
Is it this one?
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Actually, the whole purpose of the Vedic system, the Vedic social order, is to enable one to ultimately return home, back to Godhead. So this is what Krishna's instruction is. How can we go back to God? And he's saying, always think of me. Become my devotee. But our mind likes to think of so many other things. So we need to practice. The mind will run away. Again, we practice to bring it back. Bring it back to Krishna. Again, the mind runs away. Again, we practice to bring it back. The Grihastha ashram is a sort of concession combining sense gratification with the regulative life. It is to enable one to easily retire in the middle of life and engage fully in austerities in order to transcend material sense gratification once and for all. Therefore, in the Vanaprastha stage of life, tapasya or austerity is strongly recommended. So austerity for us is austerity in Krishna consciousness, chanting the rounds, being Krishna conscious, offering food to Krishna, like that. Fasting on Ekadashi, on the appearance days of the Lord. Pṛthu Maharaj followed exactly all the rules of Vanaprastha life, which is technically known as Vaikhanasa ashram. The word Vaikhanasa, Susamate, is significant because in Vanaprastha life, the regulative principles are also to be strictly followed. In other words, Maharaj Pṛthu was an ideal character in every sphere of life. Mahājano yena gata sapantha. Mahājano yena gata sapantha. One should follow in the footsteps of great personalities. So we may think, okay, great personality means I need to follow in the footstep of some famous entertainer or some famous, politician, some celebrity. But Bhagavatam says, follow in the footsteps of the devotees, the pure devotees. Because we can see that not imitating, we cannot imitate them. We cannot imitate Maharaj Pṛthu's activities, but we can follow his instructions, what he was telling the citizens. That he was saying, do your duties for the satisfaction of Krishna, be Krishna conscious. So, like that. So that we can also go back home, back to Godhead. The devotees, pure devotees, always live in the spiritual world. And by following the exemplary character of Maharaj Pṛthu, one can become perfect in all respects while living this life or while retiring from active life. Thus, after giving up this body, one can become liberated and go back to Godhead. Because that's the goal, to go back home. So if we follow in the footsteps of the great devotees, then we can also go back home, back to Godhead. The pure devotee is always telling us to hear and chant. Follow them. Kandamula falahara.
Kandamula phala ahar.
Shushka parnashana kvachet.
Shushka parna ashan kvachit.
Abhaksha katichit pakshan.
Abhaksha katichit pakshan.
Vayu bhakshas tataparam.
Vayu bhakshas tatah param.
In the Tapovad, Maharaj Pṛthu sometimes ate the trunks and roots of trees. Sometimes he ate fruit and dried leaves, and for some weeks he drank only water. Finally, he lived simply by breathing air. Does anyone remember anyone else who was doing like this austerities, ate only little, then
Dhruv
drank?
Maharaj.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dhruv Maharaj.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. In Bhagavad Gita. So we can't imitate, right? But we can follow the instructions. We may try to eat like this, and then we may say, "Oh, I have to sleep on the bed for a week because I didn't eat enough." So, but we follow the instructions of the devotees. In Bhagavad Gita, yogis are advised to go to a secluded place in the forest and live alone in a sanctified spot there. By Pṛthu Maharaj's behavior, we can understand. And when he went to the forest, he did not eat any cooked food sent from the city by some devotees or disciples. The Krishna is saying the way of yoga in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Dhyan Yoga. So yoga, meditation, he's saying we cannot do it in the cities. Krishna is saying you need to go to the forest to do it. And then Prabhupada is pointing out that Pṛthu Maharaj has gone to the forest, but he's not like ordering in, there's no Uber Eats or anything coming from the city. He's just eating whatever is available in the forest. As soon as one takes a vow to live in the forest, he must simply eat roots, tree trunks, fruits, dried leaves, or whatever nature provides in that way. Pṛthu Maharaj strictly adopted these principles for living in the forest, and sometimes he ate nothing but dried leaves and drank nothing but a little water. Sometimes he lived on nothing but air, and sometimes he ate some fruit from the trees. In this way, he lived in the forest and underwent severe austerity, especially in regards to eating. In other words, overeating is not at all recommended for one who wants to progress in spiritual life. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, don't eat too much, don't eat too little. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Balance. Krishna is also encouraging us to balance. Sri Rupa Goswami also warns that too much eating and too much endeavor, atyahara prayashascha, are against the principles by which one can advance in spiritual life. Over endeavor, trying too hard. But according to our nature, we do the things that we need to do. The modes will make us act. But when we overdo it, that's what we are recommended not to. Krishna is saying, get a balance. It is also notable that according to Vedic injunction, to live in the forest is to live in the mode of complete goodness, whereas to live in the city is to live in the mode of passion, and to live in a brothel or drinking house is to live in the mode of ignorance. However, to live in a temple is to live in Vaikuntha, which is transcendental to all the modes of material nature. So in Vaikuntha, there is no goodness, passion, ignorance. Everything is in the platform of pure goodness. And Prabhupada says the ISKCON temples are like Vaikuntha, because the center is Krishna. Everything is being done for the pleasure of Krishna. This Krishna consciousness movement affords one the opportunity to live in the temple of the Lord, which is as good as Vaikuntha. Consequently, a Krishna conscious person does not need to go to the forest and artificially try to imitate Mahārāja Pṛthu or the great sages and munis who used to live in the forest. Srila Rupa Goswami, after retiring from his minister's seat in the government, went to Vrindavan and lived beneath a tree, like Mahārāja Pṛthu. Since then, many people have gone to Vrindavan to imitate Rupa Goswami's behavior. Instead of advancing in spiritual life, many have fallen into material habits, and even in Vrindavan have become victims of illicit sex, gambling, and intoxication. The Krishna consciousness movement has been introduced in the Western countries, but it is not possible for Westerners to go to the forest and practice the severe austerities which were ideally practiced by Pṛthu Maharaj or Rupa Goswami. However, Westerners or anyone else can follow in the footsteps of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur by living in a temple which is transcendental to residence in a forest, and to vow to accept Krishna Prasad and nothing else. Follow the regulative principles and chant 16 rounds daily of the Hare Krishna mantra. In this way, one's spiritual life will never be disturbed. So Srila Prabhupada is telling us, we modern people, we don't need to go to the forest. We can follow the regulative principles, chant Hare Krishna, have Krishna Prasad, and in this way go back home, back to Godhead. Are there any comments? Questions? So we can see by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, because he knows we are Kali-yuga people, where we'll go forest and do such austerities. We're not able to do like this kind of austerities in Kali-yuga. So he says, you chant Hare Krishna. And he's made the process simpler for us. It's by Lord Chaitanya's mercy. So by his mercy, we hear and chant the holy names. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Thank you so much for listening and joining in. Hari Bol.